And as a result, used a lot of shortcuts to meaning in stories. And one of those shortcuts is that mostly bad guys are ugly, and they wear green and yellow, because your heroes are wearing the primary colors of blue and red and yellow. I'm sorry, well, yellow because it goes both ways, so you have your Superman blue and red, stuff like that. So Loki's in green, the Enchantress is in green, because it contrasts with what the colors the heroes are in. This is a time when there were about, 37, 38 effective colors in comics, if that.
Because it did more than that because of variations.
They did have some, well, when I was given a color chart to do some coloring with, Jack Adler's crossed off about 8 of the colors, so you can't use these, because they were all like all the colors at once, they were all very brown, and they were kind of similar browns. So don't use these. So it wasn't very many colors. And so you had to be fairly simple. And because the bad guys were ugly, I wanted to make this character I was creating a monster, because that means, as a writer, what you want to do really is you want people to read your comic, read your story, and be misdirected. You don't want to play false with them, you're not going to lie to them, but you want them to draw conclusions which turn out not to be warranted. Such as, Beta Ray Bill's a bad guy because he's a monster. Which is, I didn't get any letters from anybody. I wrote the letter columns in Thor. I read all the letters. Nobody wrote me and said, well, he looks like a bad guy, but really, he picked up the hammer, he must be worthy, he must be an okay. Nobody said that. They said, how can you do this in my care? How can you have anybody else pick up? What is going on? You're destroying this guy. I have to buy the next issue. Okay, and they bought the next issue, which is really, that's my secret plan. So basically, Bill looks the way he does. Now I use a horse's skull. I will say that until I told that story publicly, nobody came back to me and said, oh, he's got a horse head. Now you hear it all the time. But he does, and the reason for it, he's based, I didn't go back and look at a horse's skull. I'm an ex-paleontologist, geologist from before I got into comics, so I kind of knew what it looked like. That big gap behind the front teeth where the bit usually goes in a horse. I did that because the skull is the emblem of death. It's one of the symbols of death, which makes a monster. But horses are also incredibly beautiful. And the skull itself is the structure on which that beauty is built. So my feeling was, by doing Bill that way, I don't expect any reader to see this. I'm not asking for it. I'm not writing it like that. But that's how I arrive at the design, is that this is both the emblem of death and monsters and the structure that makes beauty. And that's why I thought of Bill. So that's how, and then he also, his clothes changed in a kind of a Thor-like costume. Now you probably wouldn't bother doing that. Back then, it was done, they got rid of it now, so screw them. So, but that was done at the time. So when he strikes the cane, and it turns into a hammer, and he turns into kind of an ersatz Thor, I don't have to explain in a 22-page comic what just happened. Anybody reading that book is going to go, oh my God, he's got the powers of Thor. Because he's got this kind of ersatz Thor outfit. That's why that was done. It's not really the hammer's a tailor and make sure he's in a suit. But that's kind of what happens. That way I didn't have to say, Don Blake doesn't wake up and go, oh my gosh, you got my powers. I didn't have to waste any balloons on that. I just showed it, and you were off and running. So that's really why Bill was designed the way he was in the beginning of my run. That's what I came up with. So mostly stuff like that I try to figure out. And they're not all as complex as Bill was. Bill was fairly complex, as I knew he was going to figure importantly. And I wanted him to be a good character to lift up the hammer, because it was a big deal at the time. I became a bigger deal than I thought it was going to be. I went to a local comic shop over in the West Side about 3 days after the comic book came out, and I wanted to get a couple extra copies, because I thought, I could maybe use 5 copies. And I sent my parents one, and my brother, a couple of folks. And I walked in, he had like a copy of 337, and said, oh, we're sold out. You're what? We're sold out. I said, are you getting any more in? No, we're done. It's all gone. I went, what? So, and then it turned out that all the comic shops that were out of it, it took off. I don't ask me if I could do it every time I wrote a comic. I would do it every damn time I wrote a comic book, so I have no idea. But whatever it was, it took off. And then it turned out 90 at the time. I don't know what the sell-through for ordinary comics was back then. That comic, which means in the non-comic book market, They sell copies, but they don't sell all the copies, they return all the rest, and it's more complicated, but that's the simple
You
answer.
would be iffy if it's around 125,000.
Well, they would return
Yeah.
70% of the run, in theory, get credit, but you would sell 30%, or maybe 35% of the actual print run, and the rest would be pulped. So it was a very inefficient way of doing business. And what happened was on Thor, because all the comic shops sold out, the comics came out in the stands about a week later at places like 7-Elevens and mom and pop drugstores and whatever, the spinner racks around the country. And dealers, I mean comic book shop owners, all went to all those spinner racks and all those, and they bought all the copies they could find because they could sell them for like $5. And it was cost 75 cents, so it was a great return on your investment. And as a result, that book had a sell-through of like 90% at the time, and we were selling like 30. So it was really funny. It was just like, but it was really totally unexpected. I did find a few extra copies cheaper later. It became very expensive for about 20 minutes. Now it's not so expensive. It got like $30 to $35, but I'm not that hot a property, so it's back down to whatever, some more reasonable price.
And you both also brought in some other design elements. You brought in Norse architecture and the letter forms that you were using in the sound effects and the titles and things like that. And you also brought in more elements from Norse mythology, like the...
Well, I wasn't on John's, I was talking about on John's behalf. Before I met John and began working with him, any work that I inked, I pretty much did my own sound effects. I liked letter forms, I did letter forms. I was not as good as John, that's why I quit doing them. But when I began working with John, a lot of his work at the time, I would have said, you may contradict this if you wish, that they were based both on calligraphy and on type. There was a lot of that underlying structure.